I was elbow deep in rewriting a client-facing report that Samantha Quinn, the founder's newly anointed daughter and freshly crowned chief strategy officer, had proudly turned into a confetti explosion of buzzwords and pastel clip art. The deadline was in 4 hours. She'd dropped it on my desk at 9:14 a.m. with a sticky note that said, "Make it sparkle." Like we were planning a high school pep rally, not managing a $45 million federal logistics contract. That was the morning I realized something at Arcadian Supply Systems had quietly rotted. Not broken, infected, like mold creeping behind drywall. At first, you tell yourself it's harmless. Then the ceiling caves in during a meeting. 6 years I'd given this place. First one in, last one out. I'd built our org chart on a napkin back when payroll was still a suggestion. I wrote the first operations manual, the same one Samantha skimmed once and then ignored completely. Now I was scrubbing her messes like some strategic janitor while she floated through the halls, introducing herself to vendors like she'd invented procurement. I know I sound bitter. I'm not. Just tired. There's a special exhaustion that comes from being absolutely essential and completely invisible. I didn't need applause, but a correct name in the Slack thread when I saved their audit disaster would have been nice. Anyway, if you're one of the 90% listening but not subscribed, hey, no pressure. But every like keeps the caffeine flowing and the chaos coming. The first day I met Samantha, she wore a t-shirt that said, "I'm not bossy, I'm the boss." I thought it was ironic. It wasn't. Her father, Richard Quinn, founder and resident visionary, had gifted her a shiny new title straight out of a My First Executive playset. No experience, no background, just a business degree that probably cost more than my house. She walked in with a gold MacBook and the confidence of a TED speaker, immediately asking where we kept the interns. We didn't have interns. I tried to give her a chance. Maybe she'd want to learn. That illusion died in week 2 when she started renaming departments based on TikTok trends. Logistics became brand flow dynamics. Finance was growth energy. Every meeting she ran was theater. Full PowerPoint intros about synergy and lunar alignment, 10-minute decks made entirely of stock wolves and mountains. She couldn't read a revenue report, but she always circled back to big picture thinking while I quietly repaired what she broke. The team learned fast. If Samantha made a decision, they came to me to find out what we were actually doing. If she promised a client something impossible, I was the one calling them later to smooth it over. I didn't argue. I documented. I fixed. I handled the finance team's near resignation after she told them their tools were prehistoric. I corrected her hiring blunder after she tried to bring in her CrossFit friend with zero supply chain experience. Holding things together doesn't earn applause. You don't get credit for preventing disasters, only blame when something explodes. And Samantha? She saw my competence as competition. Every meeting she didn't control made her twitchy. Every time someone deferred to me, her eyes narrowed. She wanted to be the sun, not orbit it. So she started picking. "Rachel, maybe you're stuck in old systems. Rachel, I'd love to lead this project for visibility." Each line came with that tight smile and fake feminist pep talk. Her way of saying, "You're in my way," dressed up in positivity and Pinterest quotes. Richard, bless his deluded heart, nodded along like she was Steve Jobs in heels. But I'd seen worse. I stayed calm. I started a private folder called Contingency. Screenshots, memos, timestamps, Slack threads, nothing malicious, just insurance. Because people like Samantha never strike directly. They smile while sawing the floor out from under you. What I didn't know yet was that her plan wasn't to quietly sideline me. It was to fire me publicly, loudly. It started small, forwarding my updates to the board with my name deleted, renaming documents I'd written, attaching her initials like some branding exercise. Once is ego, twice is pattern. By the 5th, I stopped pretending it was oversight. She began sitting in on vendor calls she didn't understand, repeating my points 5 minutes later like divine inspiration. I smiled, I documented, because the more competent you are, the more invisible you become, until someone like her plants a flag on your mountain and calls it victory. Samantha's obsession with being seen started bleeding into operations. She reorganized our entire task board one Friday night and nearly tanked a revenue cycle. She created a color-coded urgency matrix that delayed contract renewals by 2 weeks because nobody could figure out her pastel priority system. Then she promoted her CrossFit buddy, Evan, to a senior operations role and told me to onboard him with empathy. The guy thought ERP was a political party. Still, I kept us afloat. I rebuilt what she broke, rewired systems behind the scenes, sent midnight follow-ups to clients, and quietly repaired the vendor trust she shattered every time she opened her mouth. I'd draft project plans, then watch her present them word for word with a new title like Samantha's 5-pillar transformation model. My work, her lipstick, I vented to no one, not even my husband. Instead, I expanded the contingency folder. Project files, credit trails, Slack exports, all time-stamped, clean, factual. I blind copied myself on every key email. I took screenshots of dashboards before she doctored them for investor slides. Once, she inflated a pilot program's success by 40% for aesthetics. Looked prettier until the client sued. Guess who took that call? Me. I always did. Then one Thursday evening, I got a call from Ethan Ross, one of our early investors, a quiet man from Chicago who hated buzzwords and loved numbers. His tone was casual but weighted. "Everything okay over there?" he asked. I hesitated, then said, "Operationally, yes. Strategically, depends how you define the word." He chuckled. "That bad, huh?" I didn't elaborate, but he knew. Samantha had just run an investor call like it was Shark Tank. She threw around phrases like next-gen omni-channel verticals and closed with a slide full of fireworks. Fireworks. For a Q1 update, Richard sat through the whole thing smiling like a proud dad at a kindergarten recital. He'd once killed a multi-million-dollar deal over a handshake technicality, but when it came to his daughter, his brain turned to custard. Samantha didn't understand operations wasn't theater. It was plumbing. You don't get applause for keeping the pipes from bursting, but she wanted applause so badly she'd gut the foundation to get it. A week later, she invited herself to the ops sink. No warning, no invite. She popped into the Zoom and started assigning people to projects they'd never heard of. "Michael, can you lead the sprint for Fulfillment 3.0? She asked. Michael blinked. "What's Fulfillment 3.0? Rachel will brief you," she chirped. Fulfillment 3.0 was a drone initiative she'd made up after seeing a LinkedIn post about AI logistics. We didn't even use drones. We moved medical pallets, not Amazon Prime boxes. When she left, the call went silent. I said it out loud this time. I'm documenting this. I opened the contingency folder in full view of everyone. No one protested. Some looked relieved. I wasn't scared anymore. Just prepared. I'd seen too many flameouts to mistake ambition for stability. Narcissists like Samantha don't nibble. They bite. I knew it was only a matter of time before she tried to prove she didn't need me. The email arrived at 8:17 a.m. the following Monday. Subject line, Team Realignment plus Vision Update. No agenda. Just a Zoom link and a rainbow of emojis like she was planning a baby shower, not a corporate execution. The time overlapped with a critical vendor call I'd already rescheduled twice to accommodate her. I messaged her. Conflicts with Q2 vendor prep. Can we reschedule? She replied in 10 seconds flat. Please prioritize this. It's a new era. That was her new catchphrase. New era. New rhythm. New vibration. She said it like she was staging an exorcism of competence. 10 minutes before the meeting, I updated the contingency folder, zipped my evidence files, and took a deep breath. When I clicked the link, 17 faces appeared. Ops, finance, marketing, even a couple of devs who hadn't been in a meeting since 2022. My gut turned cold. This wasn't a sync. This was theater. Samantha appeared center screen in perfect lighting. Lashes, blazer, soft focus zoom filter turned up to glam. "Hi, team," she chirped. I know this was short notice, but I'm so excited to share our leadership vision moving forward. The tone was pure HR sugar. I'd heard that tone once before, right before a roommate breakup speech. Then she said it. "Effective immediately, Rachel will be leaving Arcadian Supply Systems. No warning, no sidebar. Just a beheading via Zoom." The room froze. 17 faces blinked in perfect little Zoom boxes, each one holding its breath like we'd all just witnessed a live crime. Somewhere, a cat meowed in the background, the only sound in that awful silence. Samantha smiled wider, her voice dipped in artificial sweetness. "We're so grateful for Rachel's contributions and wish her the absolute best in her next chapter. I'll personally be stepping in to guide operations into its next evolution." She paused, tilting her head like she'd just solved world peace. "It's a new era." There it was again, that hollow mantra. She was waiting for a reaction. Maybe a tear, maybe a meltdown she could clip for HR or use as a leadership under pressure anecdote on LinkedIn. But I gave her nothing. I looked straight into the camera and said, evenly, "Noted." Then I clicked leave meeting. No speech, no theatrics. Power doesn't scream, it moves quietly. Within minutes, I revoked all passive sharing permissions from my Google Drive. The operational blueprint, locked. SOPs, archived. Vendor credentials, revoked. Everything that kept Arcadian running was mirrored, time-stamped, zipped, and uploaded to my private cloud. Samantha could guide operations all she wanted, but she wouldn't even be able to find the invoice folder. I'd renamed it Birthday Party 2017 months ago just for fun. 15 minutes later, HR called. I let it go to voicemail. Their tone was bright but uneasy. "Hi, Rachel. Just checking in regarding your transition. We'd love to discuss next steps." Next steps. Translation: sign this release and disappear. I didn't call back. Instead, I made coffee and watched the office Slack light up like a panic beacon. Then, at 10:02 p.m., my phone buzzed. A message from Ethan Ross. "You okay?" Just 2 words. I replied, "Better than you think." And I was, because Samantha had no idea what she'd just triggered. She'd fired a named officer. The clause I'd personally added during the last funding round stated that no named officer could be terminated or reassigned without prior investor consent. Breach of that clause meant the agreement could be rendered voidable at investor discretion. I'd added it after too many late nights cleaning up other people's mistakes. I wanted continuity protection. Legal slipped it in quietly. No one on Richard's side even noticed. Until now. The first wave hit about 18 hours after my firing. 3:14 a.m. My phone buzzed again. Morgan from Logistics. "Sorry, I know you're out, but do you remember where the updated escalation protocols live?" I rolled over and went back to sleep. By morning, my personal inbox was flooded. Clients, vendors, staff, everyone suddenly realized how much glue I'd been holding between their chaos and the cliff. One liaison I'd known for years wrote, "Hey, are you okay? Also, who's our point of contact now? The portal's down." Of course it was. Samantha must have gone digging into the system like it was a Pinterest board, clicking settings she didn't understand. Overnight, our fulfillment dashboard crashed. Orders duplicated. A warehouse in Ohio shipped 3 times its normal load because buffer settings reset to default. Someone on Reddit posted a photo of pallets stacked behind a loading dock with the caption, "Future of logistics, apparently." It went mildly viral. Clients called. Samantha didn't answer. She sent a Slack blast instead titled Growth Pains = Innovation Sparks. It was 4 paragraphs of corporate beige, words like learning curve, opportunity, and resilience. The kind of thing people write when they have no idea what broke. Meanwhile, inside the real operations channels, fire, missed shipments, frozen dashboards, junior staff quietly Googling, "Can you leave before stock vests?" Someone even made a meme of Samantha as the Titanic captain holding a latte while the ship sank behind her. It circulated privately across departments. 3 people forwarded it to me. Richard still defended her publicly, called her brilliant but young. Privately, he tried to message me on LinkedIn. "Hi Rachel, hope you're doing well. Just wondering, do you have notes on the Q2 partner reconciliation process? Totally understand if not." The smiley face nearly made me choke. 6 years of loyalty, and now he was emoji begging for help like I was still the office fairy godmother. I didn't reply. I just saved a screenshot and dropped it into the contingency folder, which now had a new subfolder called Aftermath. Because the storm hadn't even reached full strength yet. The investors were circling, the clients were whispering, and Samantha, still floating in her bubble of delusional confidence, kept talking louder to cover the sound of cracking walls. Cracks don't disappear when you ignore them. They spread, they splinter, and then they collapse. By Wednesday, gravity finally showed up. I was sipping coffee on my porch when Ethan called again. No greeting, no preamble. "Rachel," he said flatly, "did you know you're listed in section 4.3 of the term sheet?" I didn't flinch. "Yes," I said. "Do you have a copy?" he asked. "Of course." There was a pause, just long enough for me to imagine him rubbing his forehead the way he did during board calls. "I do now," he muttered, voice low but sharp. That was the sound of realization hitting an investor's bloodstream. The floorboards under Arcadian's glitter-coated delusion had just begun to creak. Section 4.3 wasn't buried in fine print. It was right there in plain English. The company agrees that no named officer shall be terminated or reassigned without prior written consent from the majority investor. Breach of this provision may render the agreement voidable at investor discretion. Simple, lethal, and Samantha had never read it. Of course she hadn't. She thought term sheet meant pastel slides and motivational quotes. That clause existed because of me. During the last funding round, I'd quietly asked legal if we could protect continuity, some safeguard for when founders start making impulsive, ego-driven moves. Our counsel, Lauren Pierce, added it without blinking. No one on Richard's side even noticed. They were too busy celebrating the valuation bump, and now that oversight was about to bite. Ethan didn't need to spell it out. The board was furious. His team had already been digging through the term sheet after the Reddit photo and the client complaints. "She fired you in a Zoom call?" he asked. "With no notice?" "No board notice," I said. "No internal memo. Just vibes." Ethan exhaled like gravel grinding in his teeth. "She has no idea what she triggered." "She doesn't know what she doesn't know," I replied. Which is the most dangerous kind of ignorance. I could hear voices in the background, legal team, papers shuffling, a printer chirping to life. Then a woman's voice read the clause aloud. Section 4.3, Removal of Named Officers. Investor approval required. Silence, then Ethan again. "We're convening tomorrow. Emergency session. You'll be looped in." I reminded him, "I don't work there anymore." His reply came like a hammer. "Rachel, you're a named officer. That doesn't vanish because Nepotism Barbie decided it on Slack." The line stuck. Nepotism Barbie. If only Samantha P. knew she'd just been memed at the investor level. I didn't feel vindicated. No smugness, no adrenaline. Just clarity. The kind you get right before checkmate. I made tea, sat back, and watched the sunset turn smugly pink over San Francisco. On my laptop, The contingency folder blinked open. I renamed it 4.3 Voidable. Because that's exactly what Arcadian was now. A company held together by arrogance and one clause away from collapse. The emergency board session was set for 10 a.m. Pacific. I wasn't invited. I didn't need to be. My name was already in the room, on the page, in the clause, in the investor's hands. Still, someone sent me the recording afterward. Subject line, "You'll want to see this." I watched it in my kitchen, barefoot, toast in hand, the faint hum of my fridge filling the quiet. The familiar faces appeared in neat zoom squares, Richard looking tired and shiny, 3 external board members visibly annoyed, and Samantha in the center, perfectly lit, hair curled, hot pink blazer, smiling like a game show host about to announce her own promotion. Ethan was muted, arms crossed, already scowling. Samantha started with her trademark chirp. "Before we begin, I just want to thank everyone for joining on such short notice. Change can be uncomfortable, but innovation requires decisive leadership. I believe the team is better aligned now that we've cleared space for new growth energy." She actually said that. Cleared space. Like firing people was spring cleaning. Richard, as always, nodded like a bobblehead. The other board members stared at their screens, unimpressed. Then Ethan cleared his throat. "We called this meeting to address a compliance issue." The word compliance made Samantha twitch, just slightly. Ethan didn't look at her. "This is Lauren Pierce from Legal," he continued, as a calm, stern woman appeared on screen, sliding a document into view. Lauren didn't speak right away. She just held up the hard copy of the term sheet, yellow tab on the side, section highlighted. The silence stretched. Then she slid it toward Richard. "Section 4.3, she said. "Bottom of the page." Richard squinted at it, eyes darting. Samantha smiled uncertainly. "What's that?" she asked. Lauren's tone was surgical. "Per Section 4.3, removal of any named officer without investor approval constitutes a breach of agreement. That breach renders the term sheet voidable at investor discretion." The room went dead still. Richard blinked twice. "What?" Lauren said softly. "Rachel Moore is listed as a named officer. Operations integrity." Samantha actually laughed. A high, nervous, disbelieving sound that cracked halfway through. "Wait, Rachel?" "No, she's not. She was just admin, right?" she said, glancing around for backup that didn't come. Ethan unmuted. "That's the problem," he said quietly. Richard's face looked like someone had unplugged him. His eyes darted between the paper and his daughter, mouth half open. Samantha tried again, words tumbling, but she wasn't critical. She didn't even lead strategy. One of the other board members finally cut in. "She built half your logistics infrastructure and your compliance framework," he said. Another added, "And she's the one who flagged that clause when it was signed." Samantha's voice went small. "I didn't know." Lauren didn't even blink. "Ignorance of a binding agreement doesn't void its authority." Ethan leaned forward. "She was terminated without notice, without our consent, and without documentation. That breach means our latest funding tranche is frozen. Additionally, your D&O insurance is now in question." Richard whispered something off mic, then stared at the page again. His pen slipped from his hand and hit the table with a sharp clack. Even through the recording, I felt it. The sound of realization. Final. Cold. Irreversible. Samantha blinked fast. "Wait, what does that mean?" Lauren didn't soften. "It means your unilateral decision voided investor protections. We now have the option to render the agreement void." "Void?" Samantha repeated, her voice breaking on the word. "Like reversible?" Lauren shook her head once. "No. Voidable means we decide if your agreement still exists." Samantha looked at Richard, then at Ethan, then back to the camera like she was searching for a cue card. I didn't even know that clause existed. I thought she was like, ops support." Ethan's expression didn't change. She was Operations Integrity. That's why she was named. We requested 3 names. You provided the CFO, counsel, and Rachel. You signed it. Richard's complexion turned gray. You fired the clause, he whispered. Silence. Then a small, broken sound escaped Samantha's throat. Dad, I didn't know. Why didn't anyone tell me? No one answered. The board just watched. Lauren cleared her throat. This breach exposes the company's liability coverage retroactively. The clause was written to ensure continuity in critical functions. Your action, taken without due process, has rendered that coverage uncertain. Samantha's eyes widened. But we've already spent that funding. Ethan nodded grimly. Exactly. And now every dollar of it is potentially exposed. It landed like a slap. She opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. For the first time since I'd met her, she was silent. The blazer, the lashes, the curated confidence, gone. Just a scared kid sitting in the captain's chair of a crashing ship. Richard spoke again, voice hollow. Rachel warned us. One of the older members nodded. She did. She said the clause was for protection in case someone made a move without thinking. Lauren turned to Richard. She protected your company from your own mistakes. Samantha's eyes darted between them, frantic. So, what happens now? Ethan leaned back. We're calling an investor review. No executive actions until governance is audited. All decisions frozen, including yours. Samantha's head jerked up. What? You're putting me on pause? Lauren didn't even look at her. You put the company on pause. We're just aligning the controls. Richard didn't speak. He stared at the clause like it might blink first. Samantha muted her mic. Too late. The silence she left behind said everything she couldn't. I paused the recording there. Just stood in my kitchen, the sound of my refrigerator humming behind the quiet. She thought she'd won, thought she'd humiliated me. But she hadn't fired me. She'd detonated her own company. 3 days later, the notice went public. All executive decisions are suspended pending governance review. No signature, no commentary, just a black banner on the internal dashboard and a PDF from Ethan's assistant. Within 24 hours, every shiny project Samantha had branded with her name, Fulfillment 3.0, Brand Flow Dynamics, Women Who Synergize Brunch, was quietly shut down. The website was updated overnight. Her title disappeared. No memo, no announcement, just gone, like she'd never been there. Inside Arcadian, the silence was deafening. One morning, Samantha's glossy title, Chief Strategy Officer, still sat on the website. By afternoon, it had vanished like a typo no one wanted to admit. No statement, no farewell post, just erasure by omission. Internally, they called it an optics decision, the phrase corporations use when someone's become a liability, but they'd rather not mop up the blood in public. The investor audit kicked off immediately. Richard was pulled into closed-door sessions, grilled on every email, every signature, every instance of oversight that led to this catastrophe. Word spread fast through the staff. The man who once swaggered through boardrooms preaching trust the process now looked like a homeowner watching his house burn down, clutching a useless garden hose. For years, the employees had seen me hold everything together quietly. Then Samantha parachuted in with her Instagram leadership and scented whiteboards. Now the curtain had been ripped open, and what was left was a wreck. Confusion filled the air. Meetings were canceled. Projects stalled. Slack channels that used to buzz were ghost towns. People started forwarding around my old operational memos, the ones she'd mocked for being too rigid. One junior PM sent out a PDF I'd written a year earlier titled, If I Get Hit by a Bus, Continuity Plan. It became required reading. An engineer even emailed me one sentence. I think the bus came. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. My revenge wasn't explosive. No viral expose, no lawsuit, no angry monologue. Just a clause. A line of text most of them never read. The fuse had been burning long before Samantha's glittering Zoom ambush. All I did was walk away and wait for physics to do its job. Because arrogance always thinks it's holding a shovel when it's actually holding a detonator. Richard's blind faith, Samantha's need for validation, the board's complacency, it all aligned perfectly for implosion. A symphony of self-inflicted collapse. Within a week, clients started demanding contract reassurances. 2 vendors paused fulfillment until Arcadian clarified governance. Legal scrambled, PR spun statements about temporary structural adjustments. Investors weren't buying it. Funding froze. Payroll forecasts started to shrink. Someone leaked an internal memo that read, "Contingency planning in effect until compliance verification." The irony almost made me laugh. They'd spent years rolling their eyes at my obsession with documentation. And now documentation was all that stood between them and bankruptcy. Through back channels, I heard Richard tried to blame the oversight on miscommunication. Said he thought I'd moved on naturally. No one believed him. Ethan's team had the receipts, and the paper trail didn't lie. I imagined him sitting in that conference room, tie askew, hands clasped, wondering when exactly control slipped from his fingers. Maybe it was when he gave his daughter a title she didn't understand. Maybe it was when he stopped reading the documents I wrote. Either way, his empire was now being dissected under legal microscope lighting. Meanwhile, the staff, those who'd once whispered, "Rachel will fix it," started realizing no one was coming to save them this time. One compliance analyst texted me, "We should have listened when you said documentation was oxygen." Another sent a simple, "I miss your folders." It wasn't gloating, it was bittersweet. Watching a structure you built collapse is never satisfying. It's just inevitable when the people holding it forget why it stood in the first place. By the end of the second week, Samantha had gone completely silent. No Instagram stories about resilience. No motivational posts about turbulence. Just absence. The same woman who once flooded Slack with pastel mantras now couldn't face her own inbox. The board had stripped her of access to all systems. Legal insisted it was standard protocol during review. Everyone knew better. It was containment. I kept my distance. No public comments. No triumphant posts. I didn't even forward the internal meltdown threads that started circulating on Reddit. I just observed, calm, detached, like a firefighter off duty, watching someone else play with matches. Then, 2 weeks after the freeze, Ethan called again. His tone was lighter this time, almost amused. "I think it's time we talked," he said. "About what?" I asked. "About what comes next?" 2 weeks later, I sat across from Ethan in a quiet downtown office that didn't yet have a company name on the door. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, cutting clean lines across a real wood desk. No fluorescent chaos, no pastel slogans. Just 2 glasses of water and a single contract folder sitting between us. "You don't have to read it now," Ethan said, nodding toward the folder. "But you should know your name's on page 1. I smiled. Small, deliberate, no performance. "I'll read it," I said. "All of it." He laughed, short and tired. I figured. It wasn't Arcadian's office anymore. This was something new, smaller, sharper, built on competence instead of charisma. A venture already funded, already structured around expertise, not inheritance. 2 weeks after the emergency freeze, Ethan had called with just 8 words. "I'd like to do it differently this time." Then he added, "And I want you in the room from day 1. "What seat?" I'd asked. "COO, he said, "with equity, real equity." So here we were. He didn't make speeches. No sentimental apology for what I'd endured. No dramatic promise about rebuilding trust. Just the offer, the trust, and the quiet weight of new authority being placed in my hands like a set of keys. While he talked logistics and next steps, I glanced toward the window. Down below, the city moved in rhythm. Taxis, pedestrians, a delivery truck reversing somewhere in the distance. Order, flow. Everything working because someone, somewhere, quietly kept the system stable. People like me, the invisible ones. When he finished, I opened the folder. The contract was clean, precise, beautifully written. I could tell Lauren's legal team had drafted it. Tight clauses, no fluff. Near the end, just above the signature line, sat a familiar phrase. Named officer. Operations integrity. Still mine. Only now it carried weight. Teeth. I reached for the pen. My phone buzzed before the ink touched paper. A notification. Breaking. Arcadian Supply Systems funding suspended amid governance concerns. Sources cite internal leadership disputes and investor breach. The headline didn't surprise me. The subhead did. Founder Richard Quinn steps down pending review. I didn't screenshot it, didn't smile, didn't send it to anyone. I just tapped it away and signed. One neat signature. Final, quiet, irreversible. Ethan nodded once, closed the folder, and slid it into his briefcase. No champagne, no handshake. Just mutual understanding between two people who'd seen how easily competence gets buried under ego and how quietly it can rise again. On my way out, the receptionist handed me a new badge. My name freshly printed. Rachel Moore, Operations Integrity Officer, Founding Team. I slipped it into my pocket and stepped into the daylight. The air felt clear for the first time in months. No more fixing someone else's messes. No more smiling through sabotage. Just a clean start, built on substance instead of sparkle. I walked down the block, coffee in hand, the city noise rising around me. Somewhere across town, Arcadian's offices were probably half empty. Servers frozen, Slack channels dead, people whispering about layoffs and audits. I didn't need to see it. I'd already witnessed the collapse long before the headlines did, because sometimes revenge doesn't come in fireworks or lawsuits. It comes as a quiet line buried deep in a document, a single clause waiting patiently for arrogance to trip over it. That's what Section 4.3 was. My insurance, my boundary, my proof that doing things right still matters. They thought they'd written me out. Instead, they erased themselves. I turned the corner, sunlight flashing off car windows, the city alive with possibility. Somewhere behind me, the bridge they'd built out of ego and glitter was still burning. I didn't look back. I'd already crossed. Because the loudest revenge isn't screaming in the boardroom. It's walking into your next one, calm, prepared, and holding the pen that writes the new rules. So I did what I'd done my entire career. I kept moving, quietly, efficiently, and for the first time, the system I built was finally mine. Because sometimes the smartest move on the corporate chessboard isn't taking the king. It's making sure the next game starts on your terms.